Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Let's Get Vulnerable podcast. We have a very special guest with us here today. Katherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Katherine has an incredible story that she's going to share with us. She is the best-selling author of Calling It Off. She's a conscious mama, wife, and wanderer. And I know that you are going to love connecting with her, hearing her story, and we are going to get into all things trusting your gut, your intuition, building self trust, and how we can make really intentional relationship choices. So, this is a powerful episode for anyone who maybe has felt like they haven't been able to call in their person, or they called in a relationship but it doesn't feel quite right and they don't know what to do. This is going to really help you with navigating your life and your relationship decisions. So, Katherine, I'm really excited to dive in.
Yeah, thanks. Me too.
I know a lot of Catherines go by a shorter name. What do you prefer?
I am a rare full Catherine. So I
I
am
like it.
full Catherine.
I'm really excited about motherhood, which I'm sure you and I will talk about, but I have a girl's name and I want her to be called Victoria, and I will be very particular. It's not Vicky. It
hmm
is Victoria. So anyways, I love the long name.
when I was little, my mom taught me to say, while Kathy or Katie or whatever it may be is a lovely name, it's not my name. So it was a little, little much for a little one to say, but maybe you could steal that
I love
for
that.
Victoria. hmm
I love that. The assertiveness at a young age. Amazing. Well, I'm so excited to have you on the show, and we have some things in common. One of those things being calling off a wedding.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to just back up though. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood experiences, your early relationship, experiences, and maybe how you found yourself in that place? Let's just dive into your story and how you got to that place.
Absolutely. Early childhood, my parents divorced when I was 5. So I saw that kind of crumble at a very early age. And then my mom remarried a decade later and I had a wonderful relationship there. But, I had kind of seen the dissolving of the family from that space. And so I think I always was craving that stability, that loving partnership. I wanted to be incredibly intentional about who I chose to build my life with, which is so interesting that I somehow still managed to end up in a place where I was about to make the wrong choice. Um, but I'm originally from Oklahoma, and there are a lot of expectations around when you get married, when you start having kids, and that is really a prized achievement, if you will, and relates to a lot of your worth. And so I think I internalized a lot of that growing up, that this was both something I really desperately craved, for that feeling of
Mm.
love and safety, and also something I had to achieve, in order to be really a valuable and successful woman. So I was in several relationships. I had a lot of dating relationships, many of which got to a certain point of seriousness and then just weren't right, until I met my former fiance, and I was 29 when we met. So like just on the precipice of 30. So many of my friends had already gotten married, were having kids, and I was living in Colorado, so the pressure was a little bit different. But seeing everybody around me, I was like, okay, like it's time. I want a family. I knew I wanted kids. It was really important to me to be a mom. And that pushed me, I think, to just ignore red flags, to ignore what I was feeling. We obviously loved each other, but we weren't meant for marriage. And yet I just ignored that, to pursue what I thought I should do, to get to the marriage, which I thought would be that safety and security,
Mm.
rather than the partnership being the safety and security. It was like the checkbox. That was what really mattered. So yeah, so that led me to say yes, despite knowing even in the moment that it just felt a little off. And then it was pretty turbulent process to come to terms with my decision. I can't wait to hear about your kind of process through that all too. I'm sure there's similarities. But yeah,
Yeah, so that's, I think, such an important piece about the expectations of marriage and cultural norms and kind of having beliefs early on that that was your worthiness as a woman was to be in a marriage and maybe even your primary role.
absolutely. Primary role, primary duty. So much more in relation to others rather than relation to self.
Hmm.
Daughter, then wife, then mom. I mean, it's all in relationship to others. And I don't think I had come to determine my own sense of worth internally, and identity in that without the expectation.
And would you say kind of this time in your life in your 20s, I know this was the case for me of was there a lot of people pleasing, self-abandoning? Did you kind of operate as pretty disconnected from yourself during that time?
I think so. I am the oldest of four. Um, so there is achievement and people pleasing in my nature. I want to keep peace. I want to keep everybody happy. I want to be successful. I want to like hit all the benchmarks. I'm absolutely a perfectionist. And I think all of those things rolled together just really led to an abandoning of self, and a betrayal of maybe what I didn't even realize I wanted and needed. I think I had stopped paying attention to it for so long that I needed that trigger of a big life moment to bring me back and to like reawaken my awareness of myself.
Mm. Well, we are going to get into all of that. I can't wait. And tell us the story. Let's go back to when you first met your ex-fiance and just how the whole relationship unfolded.
Yeah, so we met, as many do in your late 20s, on a Sunday fun day at a local place in Denver. And I mean, we had instant connection. He was very good looking, charming, Southern, and just a lot of fun. And I was wanting to find the right relationship, but I also was just trying to have a good time too. And so we really connected on that level, and that never really changed. We always had a lot of fun together. We could be goofy and silly together, and it was, the bedrock of what we built a relationship on. But fun only gets you so far. And when we really started to move through the phases and think about a more serious commitment and what that meant for life and what that meant for family and kids and futures, those were so completely misaligned. Um, and we recognized that, but we didn't prioritize it. Like we kind of just brushed it aside in service of, next steps. So we had a lot of really wonderful times, and then life came and we could not navigate it together despite our best efforts.
So it was really fun, really easy. And then when it came to having deeper conversations or maybe even conflict or, the values conversations, those felt really hard to have.
Yeah, we couldn't, not only did we not align on them, we couldn't communicate about it. So it wasn't just that we were coming from different places. And there was, a lot of toxicity in that as well. I mean, it wasn't just we want different futures, but the way we interacted, we brought out the worst in each other, myself included. Like I didn't love the way I was showing up as a person and the way I showed up in the relationship either. And I
Mhm.
think realizing just how much we were in this toxic cycle of bringing out the worst in each other was, not a way to build a future, especially when you want to bring kids into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's so hard, right? Because you're in the relationship, you're having fun, and then there's that little voice in the back of your mind of like, okay, I'm checking the box. I'm almost 30. I can have this part of my life figured out and I won't have to worry about it again. And there's just that pull to be like, okay, this is good enough. So walk us through getting engaged. I mean, take us all the way through calling off the wedding. I know people listening are invested in hearing how this all unfolded and what you learned through it all.
Absolutely. So we planned a really beautiful trip to, Champagne in France. And we had been talking about marriage, and I had, helped pick out the ring, and I knew he had it. So I was like kind of hopeful. I was like, oh, maybe this is it. And it turned out it was. He proposed when we were on a wine tour in Champagne, and it was incredibly romantic. And it's kind of everything you think you want.
Mm.
And it was like picture perfect, honestly, picture perfect, beautiful proposal. Um, but even then, like I just felt this flatness, and I started to have some second guessing. We had not traveled abroad together previously, and I think that brought out a lot of conflict. And we had, another week of this trip. We got engaged on the front end, and as the trip went on, I mean, I've never seen a trip go south so fast. To be completely honest, we were just fighting more than we ever had, having these big conflicts and kind of explosions. We ended up coming home early from our engagement trip. I mean, it was big. Uh-oh, like pretty quick. Um, but we distracted ourselves, started planning the wedding, planned this huge facade, performative, over the top wedding that was so inauthentic, to kind of who I am and how I wanted to show up. But we were putting a band-aid on it, a really pretty band-aid, but putting a band-aid on this supremely flawed relationship by planning a perfect wedding. And that worked for a while. As we were moving forward there. And then, and then you start to listen to the signs a little bit more. And I'm happy to go into that too.
Yes, I think this is such an important piece that you're talking about because, as you know, we can all go down the social media comparison and we can look at all the perfectly aesthetic pictures of, the happy engagement shoot or the most perfect wedding, and we start comparing ourselves. And I think that reality of just because something looks amazing, we actually don't know what's going on inside, or what is the quality of someone's relationship or what they're really experiencing. So I think that's just a beautiful reminder. And I love how you have that acknowledgement of we were distracting ourselves. I think in relationships that can be easy to do. Life gets busy. You can be focusing on, oh, we're gonna buy a house together, or gosh, we're gonna have a baby together, right? There can be all of these things that we can use as a distraction, as a band-aid. So I love that you shared that part. So take us closer. What's going on or yeah, closer to the day? Like what's going on as you're planning this? The wedding day is approaching. How does this all unfold?
It was a slow build. I think, the doubts, there were red flags before we got engaged. Once we got engaged, the doubts really kind of sunk in, and I started to pay attention a little bit more. But for several months, I really didn't want to acknowledge that it was more than just a little bit of relationship anxiety. It was more than a little cold feet. Like we had these deep rooted issues, and I was having real questions. I tried to self medicate with alcohol. Like I started drinking a lot. I was having like physical manifestations of anxiety and headaches and sleeplessness and just a total lack of self care. So I knew from that perspective that I could feel something was wrong and it felt bigger. We also, our fights got bigger and more toxic and just harder to withstand, I guess is a way to put it. The doubts were louder. Let's say
Yeah.
it that way. And I didn't talk to many people about it because I didn't want to break the image, of this perfect relationship. And I didn't want to poison other people's views against someone who at this point might still be my husband. Like I really didn't want to poison the waters. Until
Mhm.
ultimately I did start being honest on a small scale with a few people and with my therapist. I finally kind of said about 3 months before was when I was finally able to even say out loud, like, I am having real doubts and I don't know what to do with this and I'm not sure what I want, but I'm finally ready to talk about it and to consider a possible future that is not marriage to this person. Like it wasn't until about 3 months before that I even opened the door that there might be another path I could take.
And during this time, obviously, I'm glad that you shared kind of some of the physical symptoms and how it was impacting your sleep and the headaches and the body tells us, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's so important one thing I'm curious about during that time, was there recurring thoughts coming up for you where you were almost trying to invalidate yourself at all of maybe like, oh, this is normal premarital jitters, or did anybody close to you maybe try to brush it off or invalidate it or tell you, hey, this really is no big deal. This is normal.
I don't think I talked enough to other people about it to give them the opportunity to brush me off. I think some people knew more than they let on and would ask small questions to see, how
Mm.
willing I was to open up. And for the most part, I wasn't super willing. Like that was me. I really kept it all to myself. I think I didn't so much as invalidate the doubts as I felt the family and the marriage on the other side, and like the goal was more important than the doubts. Like I wanted
Mm.
this beautiful family, this beautiful home life more than I wanted to be true to myself. And over time, I think that balance ultimately shifted, which is why I was able to make the choice I did, but it was hard.
Yeah. And just to be, I'm just very curious here about this because obviously it's a lot to be going through in the months before your wedding. It's kind of funny. I'm 3 months before my wedding right now. So I'm like putting myself, if I happen to be feeling that way, and just how, gosh, how hard that would be because you've already planned a lot. You've got people who've RSVP'd, the whole thing is in motion at this point, right? So I'm just curious, like, could you talk to your fiance at all about your doubts? Was it something that, or was it like, absolutely not, you couldn't bring it up to him?
There were times when we were very honest about the struggles in our relationship. We saw a couples therapist um, around that time. It was like, this is a make or break moment. Like we need to try, and we tried. I mean, we wholeheartedly tried, and it was so ineffective. Like
Mm,
even with help, we could not align and have a communication around it. And I think that's really was a defining moment of, I think it's normal to have a doubt here or there. And I think that if the partnership and the foundation is strong, you can have that conversation without it being catastrophic. Um, I think that tells you something really beautiful about it being more of a cold feet situation rather than like a deep seated misalignment. But we couldn't. we
yeah.
we couldn't make any progress. Um, and in a lot of ways, that then further degraded us because I lost hope, and I think probably on some level we both did.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'm sure the audience is like, okay, tell us the story. Let's get to it. So you open up to your therapist. It's 3 months before you're getting closer and closer. Tell us how this all unfolds.
So it took another 2.5 months. So I did not ultimately come to a decision until 2 weeks um, before the wedding, which, as you can imagine, the pressure only builds, the financial commitment only builds, the shame and guilt that you feel of potentially making a different choice gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And yet through therapy and through my own reflections, I really had to just disregard all of that and remove it as a factor to get married. I had to come to terms with everything I was really terrified of, scared of, you know, being unmarried in what would be my mid 30s, scared of never having a family of my own, biologically anyway. I was terrified of all of that, and yet I really had to name those fears and grieve them as a loss. I had to pretend like I'd already lost it and come to terms with that in order to say, like, this is not a reason to get married. I had to really remove them from my decision making process and just keep listening. Like ultimately the voice, like truly like a voice inside saying not this, just got so loud that at my final dress fitting, I was by myself. It's my final dress fitting. It's the last time I was trying on my dress. 2 weeks before, I really had what I can only describe as a bit of a dissociative moment of feeling totally outside my body and looking at someone probably honestly for the first time and just seeing the total disconnect with the life. Like it was not my dress. It was not my wedding. Like it just really clicked into place. Like this wasn't the life for me. And so when I left, I called, one of my best friends who I call the ride or die in the book and told her. And it was the first person and the first time I'd ever said out loud, like, I'm not going to get married. And then I had to proceed to let my then fiance know as well, and the rest of the rest of the wedding guests too.
How did your friend, your ride or die friend, I love that. How did she
Yeah.
react?
She said, "Are you sure?" That was the first and only real thing she said was, "Are you sure?" She didn't second guess me. She wasn't like, "Are you crazy? What's going on? Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. No, don't do it." Just, "Are you sure?" And when I said yes, absolutely, she said, "Okay, well, do you have a plan and do you need help with one?" And I said, "No, I have no plan. I'm not sure when I'm actually going to, talk to my then fiance, but I will let you know." Kind of went from there. But just the lack of invalidation, her really just believing me and taking me at face value and supporting what I needed was such a beautiful response. And I'm still forever grateful to her for that. Just really calm reaction.
Yes. Yes. She could have been like, "Oh, it's the pre-wedding jitters." She could have gone down all kinds of different paths, but she
Mm-hmm.
just decided to, hold space for you and validate the decision. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then when you told your fiance, the audience is dying to know. I know I'm dying to know. How did you prepare for that conversation? How did it go? What happened?
Was thinking I would probably give myself a few days. I had been lucky enough to get my dress in New York, and so I had to fly home to my life. I was living in Denver at the time, and I was rehearsing what I was going to say. I really wanted, not to hurt somebody who I loved and still loved on some level. I didn't want to cause any more hurt than obviously what was about to happen would cause, and so I tried to run it through my mind. I was trying to prepare, and I came home and I thought he was going to be at work. It's like the middle of the day. And I still don't know why, but for some reason he was home when I came in and I was completely unprepared. Um, and I don't think I wasn't going to say anything right then. I was like, oh, I'm not ready. This is a surprise. And then he, started talking about wedding gifts, and I couldn't in good conscience let him spend money on a wedding gift for a wedding I had, decided the day before I didn't want. And it just triggered me to say, please, don't buy me anything. I don't. I do not want to get married. Um, and as you would expect, a pretty big blow up ensued. I mean, understandably, this is shocking and hurtful, and I give so much grace for, the bigness of that conversation. But I knew how I felt, and so I just tried to stay really calm, which I'm sure was even more hurtful by being calm and potentially a little detached, just trying to get through without caving in, because I think it's really easy to see the emotions of the person on the other side and be like, oh, never mind. I want to stop your hurt. So I'm going to change my mind. And I owed it to myself and him for that matter, not to let that be swayed. So then we had a big blow up fight and took some space away. And, within 2 weeks, we lived together at the time. So we lived together for a few weeks, and then ultimately he moved out and went about the process of letting friends and family and vendors know, that we were not getting married.
And was it as, terrible and scary as your brain had imagined? Because I think sometimes we can catastrophize things, can't we? I mean, not that it wasn't horrible, I'm sure it was, but I wonder, did it live up to maybe some of the catastrophizing in your brain?
In the moment, it was hard and remains probably the most difficult conversation I've ever really had to have.
Yes.
And what felt like hours was like 15 minutes, 30 minutes of this terrible conversation. And what I thought would be months of agonizing and undoing and uncoupling was a few weeks. And what I thought would be horrible conversations calling all my guests actually brought me relief. And there were so many of those pieces that I was terrified of, that I had catastrophized and said, I can't make it through this. Like, there's no way I'm going to survive this. That actually ended up being shorter, easier, and yes, really hard, but I'm so much more able to overcome it than I gave myself credit for. And that was actually a silver lining of like really cool to see on the other side of I had been terrified of all this and thought it would last a lifetime. And it was, you know, a few months of horrible things, but it got better faster than I ever thought possible because I
Mm,
really believe it was the right choice.
I love it. And then we get to the part of you connecting to your self-trust and finding yourself. Take us there. How did you go about your healing after this experience?
There were so many parts that needed to be healed. I felt like I had to heal relationships with my family, um, with some of my friends. When you break up with someone, I think you lose more than your partner. I lost a family I thought was going to be my in-laws. I lost some friends in the process. All worth it, but there was a lot of healing there. And then in a big way, relationship to myself. But I think even making the choice was like the first step in the right direction. It was such a big choice to finally trust myself on. The little ones started to get easier and easier. And so it was this foundation in a way of just continuing to build on that prioritization of self and really listening to my body, listening to my gut and not putting myself in that position again. So I did, as I started dating again, had some almost perfect, relationships subsequently that I very quickly then listened to that same internal no and far more rapidly, came to the conclusion that it was not the right choice and then exited pretty quickly. But again, each one just built that muscle and, ultimately have a very happy ending, but I had to continue to build that muscle and continue to say, yeah, nope, still no, still hold the boundary, still not right, repeatedly. And, with a little more heartbreak too. But repeatedly until ultimately it was like really easy to have a whole body yes when I ultimately met my now husband.
I love this. I think obviously there's a lot of people who are dating who tune into the show. And one of the things that is so common to struggle with is, okay, well, how do I know though when when it's my person? And I think it can be really challenging to surrender the timeline, which is something I want to talk to you about,
Mm-hmm.
and to focus on alignment instead of, okay, I'm gonna check the box by X date, right? So can you talk about that? Do you feel like you had to let go of the timeline?
1000%. Even when I made the decision to call off the wedding, I had to let go and again grieve any timeline that might look like, right? Like I had to completely let go of it, or else I don't think I would have walked away. And then I had to keep that, I essentially like paused my biological clock, so to speak. And then after I couldn't hit play again because otherwise I would make the same mistake. And so ultimately when I met my now husband, I think part of what was really incredible was I was older, right? I was 32 when we met. I was now in my 30s at the time. And yet when were dating, we dated for 2.5 years before we got married, 2.5 years before we got engaged. I mean, that timeline could have very easily like re-triggered we must get married. We must have a child now. And yet I was so happy in that relationship and in the foundation we were building and the life that we were creating with ease and joy and like genuine love that I kept the timeline on pause. And that to me really let me know I was kind of in the right space because I was prioritizing the right pieces. Um, and ultimately, we got to a good place. But I think by not feeling that same pressure, the absence of it told me so many of the positive things I needed to know.
Yes, I relate to this so heavily in terms of my story with my fiance and really being in our relationship and probably for one of the first times ever in my life not feeling the timeline pressure and not being like, "Oh, when is he going to propose? When is it coming?" My engagement was a complete surprise because I had no involvement in it. You know what I mean? Like I had just completely surrendered to the timeline. And I feel like that is very, very helpful with the right person. The right person makes that surrender even
Hmm.
easier in my experience.
Yeah, and you don't even think about it. You don't even think I'm giving up my timeline. You just live in that reality, you live in that relationship. And I have and you as well have the very interesting perspective to be able to compare and contrast,
Mhm.
two different proposals, two different engagement seasons. I fully planned two different weddings. And yeah, second time around, I was completely surprised as well, despite the fact that we had been together for even longer than my first relationship. And the wedding I planned was so, so different. We ended up with a small family relationship, like love focused ceremony on a ranch in Montana that was really intimate and equally as, beautiful, but
What
just so much
ranch
more.
was it?
The ranch at Rock Creek.
Oh,
Um,
this is so funny. You know that well, I don't know if you know this. I live in Montana.
I did know you lived in Montana. Yeah. Where are you?
So I'm in Bozeman,
Yep.
but we're doing our wedding at a ranch in Montana in the Flathead Lake area with just yeah, focus on family and relationships. So that's so funny. I love it. I know right where you're talking about. It's very beautiful.
Was. And, again, it reflects the relationship in all the positive ways and in all the best, most
Yeah.
grounded and authentic ways. And I think each piece of that really just further reminded me all the way up until our wedding day where it was dumping snow and like I was unbothered and unfazed entirely. I think each one of those just, another brick in that reminder of, yeah, I'm in the right place and I'm with the right human
Mm.
and I can trust that feeling.
And I'm curious for you, this could be a whole other episode, but this relationship with your husband, can you name some of the key things that helped you know it was different and know that this was the right partnership for you?
Yeah, I think early on, one of the pieces was just an ease and an alignment on our values. I mean, that was super clear up front. Um, our ability to laugh together, I think it's so indicative of a friendship and of just this like deep level of respect that we have for each other, deep level of love, our ability to conquer endless challenges. I mean, we started dating right before COVID, um,
Mm.
which was a crucible for so many people. We moved abroad after only dating for 6 months. We up and moved our life abroad during COVID and really just tested it. And yet could have the tough conversations, could laugh our way through really, deep and life altering challenges. And just continue to be curious and grow together. I mean, being able to have the conversation and come out stronger is incredible. And then you add parenthood on top of that. And if you don't have the ability to really openly communicate about those pieces, it gets 1,000 times harder. So I've been really lucky and blessed to see our relationship even get deeper and just have more trust and compassion through the first year and a half of motherhood in a way that is just the coolest thing. Um, just to see our relationship continue to grow.
Does your heart just explode with love when you see him with your daughter?
It's indescribable. I mean, it is. It makes me laugh because, of course, he's admittedly like, definitely has some dad jokes and like kind of a wonderfully goofy dad, but it's so love filled. It is the coolest thing. Like, it is just amazing to see him show up for her and to see how he showed up for me, which in postpartum, which is such a difficult time and such a transformative space for
Mm.
you or for anyone, parent and, mom or dad. It's a new identity and how we've been able to both take on these new identities and yet remain committed. I mean, we call each other boyfriend, girlfriend, but remain committed as like boyfriend, girlfriend, primary partnership with the addition of this little bundle of chaos has been tough but amazing.
That's so beautiful. I love it. And I'm curious just in that whole conversation about what's different and how do we know when we're with the person. I think one of the things I come back to, and you mentioned this when it wasn't right, was, what does it feel like in your body? I know for me in particular, it's that peace, the regulated nervous system, the calm, no longer the intermittent reinforcement, like you described with your ex-fiance of the high highs, the low lows, right? Like not knowing what to expect, having the difficult conversations, but just that stable, calm, steady nervous system.
Yeah, and I find, I am more regulated, right, when I am with him. Alerted. I'm not activated. Like I am more stable, and I think we do that for each other. And also, there's an openness and an expansiveness rather than a contracting. Like I
Yes.
feel like when it's a no for me, it's a tension and a holding, and like I'm trying to hold so tight both onto someone and also onto yourself, that when it's right, it's just an ease and an openness that feels so much more expansive, and makes life a lot more exciting, honestly, too.
I love this. I can so relate to what you're saying. And I was on this podcast interview the other day and they were asking me, what do you think about compromising in marriage? And I kind of got to this point of, it was this long answer I had. It took me forever to kind of get to this point, but it was like, actually, when you're in a really secure, loving, interdependent relationship and you're your authentic selves, you're growing together, you have that expansiveness, you have the stable foundation. Actually, it's permission for both people to become more of who they really are, and I almost think this is this outdated notion of compromise. But of course, there's compromise maybe in the moment of, hey, for a while, I'm going to show up more for you or et cetera. But like when it comes to the big things, we need to let go of that idea of like, oh, you need to compromise part of who you are in order to be in a marriage.
Yeah, I don't even think that's a question. Like if my person was asking me to compromise part of me, especially the bits that I value most, like that just doesn't even register as a possibility, because
Right.
I don't approach him that way and he doesn't approach me that way. But yeah, of course, there are ebbs and flows of who has capacity. And I think capacity and compromise are two different things. So
Yes.
if there's times when I have 80% capacity and he's only got 30, like of course it's going to look a little bit different, but that's not a compromise. To me, that is
Teamwork.
yeah, it's teamwork, and it's a capacity based thing.
Yes, I love that so much. I think it's such an important distinction because it's just this outdated idea that we have to give up parts of ourselves when we enter into partnership because the right relationship really does support you. Um, Tell me about writing your book. When did you write it? How did that come about?
Great question. I don't know if this is typical or atypical of those who write a book, but for me, and the reason I wrote it in the first place was as I was calling it off, the thick of it, in those heavy moments, I was looking for conversations, for
Mhm.
resources, for a community, any way to feel seen with what I was going through, what I was feeling. And I found nothing. Like there was nothing I could find that talked me through what felt like a really unique experience. Mind you, it's not. A lot of people call off a wedding. A lot of people make big life pivots, but I just felt like I couldn't find it. And so I immediately started taking really terrible writing, but like raw notes and journaling and just keeping an account of what had happened, how I was feeling, and everything as I went through the next 6 months or so. So all of the unplanning, going on my would have been honeymoon. I mean, I kept these detailed
Hmm.
journal of all of the raw bits, and then I didn't touch it for years. So
Hmm.
this happened it's 6 years ago was when I called off the wedding. So for the next 2 years, I really didn't do anything with that. I always knew I wanted to write the book. Like I started taking the notes because I was like, this is where I bring value. This is where I start conversation. This is where I help someone in my position. Like that never got lost. But I took space to live life, to grow, to reflect. And then ultimately, I think the timing just aligned where I was able to look back on it from a healed place and really see the lessons and not just write the raw bits, but, use that and include
Yeah.
that to bring the lesson, to bring the perspective. Um, and so then that's when I started writing more in depth and like in the format of a book from the healed place to then be able to bring hopefully better insight to people rather than just a brain dump, which was, not that coherent anyway.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And obviously, for people who want to read your book because they want all the details of this experience and
Yeah.
all of the learning that came with it, it's called Calling It Off,
Calling it off, Memoir of an Almost Bride.
and it's on Amazon and I'm sure everywhere.
Yeah, so published by Land Hill Press, which is a female-owned publisher locally, which was really important to me to work with someone who understood transformational stories. But yeah, it's available on Amazon, online through any of your favorite local independent booksellers. If you look in their online ordering, you can get it through there. And then audiobook comes out this summer as well. So
How
that is,
exciting.
I know that is, and um, am the narrator of it, so you can hear my words in my voice, and hopefully that connects. But that will come out this summer as well.
That's wonderful. Wow. I think that it's so beautiful when you can go through something like this, process it, make peace with it, and then give it to the world in a way where they can take the lessons and the learning and, whether they're going through something similar or maybe it'll help, them prevent something, prevent future pain for them by taking your lessons. I think that this is a beautiful gift to give to the world.
I don't own it anymore. It's owned by each person who reads it, and hopefully take something away from it. So
That's
hope it helps.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, I feel like I could ask you just so many questions. We could be here for a while, but I think one thing I'm curious about is just like what's next and what you're excited about and maybe even what does your healing journey continue to look like for you because we know it's never over.
It's
PSA for anyone
never.
that's just like waiting to be fully healed. It's never
Um,
over.
it's not. It's harder and it's easier in seasons, but there are lessons learning all the time.
Yes.
I mean, what's next? I continue to write, and I love to write about kind of the vulnerable truths of it all. For me, in this phase of life, that is more motherhood and, a more mature relationship. So
Mm.
continue to write about, essays and maybe another book. We'll see. But I continue to just try to have those conversations and grow through them all because there are endless lessons to be learned with each phase of my little peanut as I'm learning. So
I
continue
love
to
this.
do
I
that.
have no doubt you have more, multiple books coming that are on your heart and I know it's about the seeds being planted and then you harvest it when it's the right time. So I have no doubt that you'll have more in the future. That's wonderful you're continuing to write.
I love it. It's processing, yes, but it's for me it's a conversation. I love feeling like there's someone on the other side of the words and then hearing back from people who have read, particular this book and just hearing that they feel seen and less crazy and more
Yeah.
empowered and more hopeful. That is the best reward. That part's a little bit addicting, so I have to keep connecting with
Yes.
folks.
I love that. I have a question for you. I want to ask you if you could speak to that version of you that, it's the 3 months before the wedding or the even leading up to the 2 weeks when you're making the decision. What would you want her to know? What words of wisdom would you be sharing with her?
I think number one would just be, you can trust yourself. You can listen to what you're feeling and make that courageous big choice, and it really will lead to far more aligned and beautiful things in the future. It's tough, but it's not as tough as continuing to live in an untruth.
Yes. Oh, so powerful. Yeah, and it's that wisdom of trust yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. We'll tell people how they can connect with you. Obviously, we talked about the book.
Mhm.
Where else can they find you?
So you can always find me on Instagram at Katherine Waller, and then my website, katherinerosewaller.com. I love to send updates and musings kind of every week and updates on book events and podcast episodes and continued future writing, continued perspective and conversations and just little things to think about for your own development and growth and journey. So find me there. And I'd love to connect.
I love it. We'll put all those links in the show notes. So make sure you connect with Katherine. And then I just have one final question for you. I ask all my guests this. You are walking down the street and someone comes up to you and they want to know your best life advice of the moment. What would you say to that person?
It comes back to the self trust piece, but it's more of a self inventory and asking yourself the question, like, do you trust yourself to make big decisions in your life? And if you can't
Mm.
immediately and wholeheartedly say yes, then what level and at what level do you have that trust? And how can you continue to build from there, choice by choice in an intentional way? So taking inventory and then purposely building that muscle because it leads to so many more aligned relationships to others, to the world, and then ultimately, to yourself, which is it all starts with there.
I love it. That is such beautiful advice. It will serve you in all seasons at all times. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time with us, Katherine. It's been really great to have this interview. And everybody, make sure you go connect with her. Go check out the links in the show notes. And I know I'll be following along with you on Instagram and staying connected. So I just can't wait to see what's coming up for you.
Thank you. And I can't wait to see your Montana wedding either.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be here before we know it.
It will.
Um,
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And everyone, of course, we are both wishing you high self worth and great relationships. Until next time.